What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JohnnyVTV Live here on this Wednesday, November 16th. It's only 5:30, but it looks like it's 11:30 outside with daylight savings time. Join with me, my co-host, my buddy, fellow Paisan, Joey Cows. What's up, baby? How we doing?
We're good. We just ate dinner.
What'd you have?
Ham, sweet potatoes, and corn.
Like Virginia ham or like,
A
uh,
nice early holiday ham.
like a holiday ham, what you would have
Like a
on
holiday
Thanksgiving or you'd have on Christmas or something like that. Little antipast, a little mozzarella, roasted peppers.
None of that, but
None of that.
more of a traditional American meal as opposed to having it with like the antipasto and the Italian way of doing it.
So you want a little Medagon this week or
Yeah.
today? little Medagon, Joe. A little bit. I mean,
Just a
that's
little
all right.
bit.
We'll give you a pass for that one. But let's get right into it, okay? So obviously we're in week 11 now. The season's moving. This is the case every year where it starts out, and then before you know it, you're more than halfway in. What'd you think of week 10? Who or what left a big impression on you as we look back on last week?
Well, this is recency bias because it was the final game of the week. But that Monday night game was a little bit of a shocker. Mainly because I think the Eagles kind of had control of the game and they lost control of the game. And as somebody who owns Devontae Smith in fantasy, I almost lost my game on that last play. I was up by about 3 points, and the whole sequence of it ended up bumping me down. So we play in Yahoo. So there was literally 0.03 points separating me and who I ultimately ended up beating. And they kind of do like the stat corrections and all that as the next day happens. So after the stat corrections and everything was corrected, I actually got a little bit of a bump, a couple of tenths of a point. So we ended up winning that game, but we had to sweat the hell out of that out at the end. So that was not fun at all. And everybody was talking about it, right? So that Bills-Vikings game, even though the Bills kind of were questionable because we didn't know if Josh Allen was going to play, they looked good in the game. It was a game I think still two top of the 5-6 teams in the NFL. But I think the way the Vikings pulled that game out at the end, I think was very unexpected. I think when you were looking at that game when we were going into overtime, when the Vikings had the ball first and they didn't get that touchdown, I think mostly everybody thought the Bills were going to come right back and put the touchdown up and win the game that way, but did not end up being the case. Justin Jefferson, your boy, who all intents and purposes right now, he's on track to win Offensive Player of the Year. He's the front runner. He made the most spectacular catch, one of the 5 best catches we've seen in the history of the NFL. You're 100% right. It was better in context than the Beckham catch. So the Beckham catch, even though it was a touchdown, it happened where there was kind of space and he was able to make the play happen. Jefferson literally mossed the guy one-handed and made the same catch. So the degree of difficulty was a lot more difficult. But I was super impressed with the Vikings. We were on that play last week with Taylor. We talked her out of the Bills. That ended up being a good decision. But yeah, so that, and then I think the Eagles losing the way that they did. I don't think it's a shocker that they lost because teams are going to stumble along the way. But I think the way that they lost that game and didn't even come close to covering, and they had control of the game there for a little bit towards the middle, and they kind of let it slip away. So I think the context of the loss matters more than the actual loss itself.
Yeah, so shout out to me and Joe here. Taylor, you're welcome if you're watching. That we talked you out of Buffalo, and Minnesota pulls it out outright. That was a big one. That was the big win of the week for us. And I would agree. I mean, I thought Minnesota was going to be good coming into the year. We talked about it. I said the Vikings are going to be a good team. They had a great piece around them. I love the Kevin O'Connell philosophy coming over from both LA teams. He brought a lot to the table. And I think there were skill players, enough of those guys, to be able to create a competitive roster that was going to not only make the playoffs, but possibly make some noise. Now, I will say, as good as the 8-1 Minnesota Vikings are on paper, they still have a lot ready to crown them just yet. But, hey, a few things happen. They might sneak the 1 seed. And before I get to the team that still is the 1 seed, I want to mention I think it's a bigger deal for Buffalo. We talked in in depth about Josh Allen suiting up and possibly re-injuring and making his elbow worse than it already is. And for all intents and purposes, his elbow kind of looked fine. He had a lot of zip on the ball. I think a lot of it was some of the bad decision makings, but we could still see some ill effects because he was missing throws and the weather was not near as bad as it was supposed to be. So that's something to monitor. And he's turning the ball over at an extremely high rate. The defense lost its teeth in the secondary. So that's a problem with Buffalo. And I was not big on Buffalo coming into the year. I've said that numerous times that come playoff times, it's going to be a huge problem if they lost Brian Dable. That being said, I think the Eagles, I wouldn't overreact to their loss, even though it is the Commanders. And, a lot of fluky things have been happening on Monday night this year. A lot. And, they had a good formula because the Eagles' run defense isn't anything great. I mean, you're missing Jordan Davis. Now I think the big problem becomes they're going to get some tough games down the stretch. Not that I thought they were going 17-0, but now you have a suddenly rejuvenated Colts team who, thanks to Jeff Saturday, got Matt Ryan back under center. Watch what happens. They win. Jonathan Taylor wakes up for the first time since week 1. And the Eagles have a lot of flaws. They have guys injured. Dallas Goedert's out for at least the next 4 weeks. A.J. Brown's banged up. Devontae Smith is banged up. Fletcher Cox is banged up. These are all key pieces. So I think we need to keep an eye on Philadelphia. So they have a lot of flaws and they have a lot of things that these backers need to look out for. These backers of Philly should start looking in other markets to secure their position.
So 2 points. Number one, I'm with you on the Bills. I think they become a better play going into the playoffs if they have that 1 seed and they have home field. And as of right now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that division is too good. I think the AFC East right now, like the NFC East, all 4 teams are either 500 or over. So yeah, and then I think I agree with you on your Eagles points, and we'll get to their game, this coming week. Now,
I mean, we could have did a better segue than that. I was going to say something like, speaking of the Eagles, let's cover the Eagles minus 6.5 at the Indianapolis Colts this week, but your way works well too. So, Joe, this line was 8.5 points before the Eagles lost on Monday.
That seems crazy to me.
What does that say to you that the Colts picked up 2 points already in the last 2 days?
Well, I think they set that line that high was because of Jeff Saturday. I think the books are still looking at bettors from the perspective of like, oh, you're going to bet on a Jeff Saturday team? And I mean, he came in the first game. I understand it was against the Raiders, but they won that game, right? So should the Eagles, coming off that loss, should they really be laying 8.5 on the road or whatever it was on the road? And yeah, that line was bet down. I actually still think it's going to get bet down before the end of the leading up into the week. I have a feeling we agree on this. I'm going to grab the Colts, right? I mean, as of this writing, we got to grab with them with the 6.5 because that's what they are in real time. But if you got them at 8, congratulations. I think you're getting a little bit of a bargain here.
I still think there's value in this line here. I do think it's going to continue to move one way or the other, and it's probably going to still continue to trend in the direction of Indianapolis. I thought this team was dead, but then they fired Frank Reich. They bring Jeff Saturday. I also went heavily. Let me say real quick, I bet against the Colts last week, took the Raiders minus 4.5, and I was big on them. However, I never would have bet them had I known Matt Ryan was going to be the starter. It was supposed to be Sam Ehlinger. We didn't find out until pretty much Sunday morning that it was going to be Matt Ryan, and by the time that happened, it was too late. Philly doesn't have teeth right now, and they're not playing to the level that we would have expected, especially like I said before in the run game. It's just not good. They're getting gashed. Jonathan Taylor suddenly has life. The line is suddenly good again. Matt Ryan looked good. I think getting 6.5 points is still valuable for Indianapolis. I'm not ready to say their season's fixed and they're turned around, although Jeff Saturday is getting a lot of consideration in the Coach of the Year market, believe it or not. I would lean Indianapolis. Nothing official just yet. I need to see a little bit more on the injury report, but I do think 6.5 at home for Indianapolis, a team that has a very similar design and infrastructure the way Washington does, is set up to give Philly a tough game.
Yeah, and I think the Colts defense, while not great, I think they have talent. They're pretty good. They haven't really let any particular game outside of, I guess, the first Jaguars loss. They lost that game 24-0, but they haven't really let any game, I guess, get particularly away from them. So I expect them to be able to not stop Jalen Hurts, but I think contain him. And we'll see what happens with the rest of the questionable tags for the Eagles going into Sunday. But yeah, I agree with you. I still think there's value in this line. Now, if it was like Eagles 3.5, like starting to get a little bit dicey as it's bet down, but I mean, you're getting more than a touchdown here, so I think there's still a lot of value.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely something to monitor here for the rest of the week, but Philadelphia, man, they are not in an exact comfortable position in the NFC East because not only do you have the Giants who are breathing down their necks, but you have the Dallas Cowboys, and this week they're laying 1.5 at the Minnesota Vikings. The 8-1 Vikings.
What did this line start out as? Wasn't it 2.5?
It was, yeah, I believe so. It was 2.5. And it's weird because the Vikings are 8-1.
It's the most suspicious line of the year.
It is. It's a very shady line. You're telling me the 8-1 Vikings, who just beat the Bills, are at home this week, and they're getting almost 2 points against Dallas,
who just coughed up a 14-point lead to the Packers with Aaron Rodgers, and they don't have receivers. And all of a sudden, I don't care about Christian Watson. He had one good game. They choked that game away in typical Mike McCarthy fashion. You guys are right, you and Taylor. Now, last week I was like, hey, he's not so bad. Well, I was wrong. But yeah, this is the most suspicious line. Again, like I've seen all year. Like, where do the bookmakers get off giving Minnesota, the team that's right now in the driver's seat to get the number 1 seed in the NFC at home? How are they getting 2? Or well, now it's, what is it, 1? But
1.5.
Still, that's crazy to me, right?
To me, I think everybody loves Dallas. They're counting on a bounce back for them. They think they're better than they actually are, which is always the case.
The most delusional fan base in the NFL, period. Not even close. Not even close.
And then, like, they're looking at Minnesota, and they're saying, outside of, like, one of arguably the best all-time catch in the NFL, Justin Jefferson, Vikings team loses. They didn't play particularly well for most of the game against Buffalo. They did enough to kind of hang around. And like Dalvin Cook and Jefferson were the difference. Patrick Peterson make a couple picks, even though he didn't overall have that great of a game. And I think they're just still overrating this Minnesota team because, like I said, they do have a lot of holes in their roster. They have the run game that they're okay at. They got gashed by Singletary. Their secondary is not good at all. They were getting absolutely turned around on Sunday by Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. And, you know, offensively, you still have Kirk Cousins, who had one of the worst interceptions I think I've ever seen in my entire life. So I understand what they're thinking, but I still like Minnesota at home. I do think the day of reckoning is coming for them. So I could understand why this is a trap line, and I do believe it is. But I haven't seen enough from Dallas to say I absolutely love them. And I would say this, though. Based off how Dallas was playing in Green Bay, aside from a couple dumb picks and like really dominating the game mostly, I do think this is why I could see Dallas. So I still would lean Minnesota because I just think they're a little bit better. But I got to tell you, Dallas is a little shady in this one here.
Well, I was going to say the most overrated unit in this game is probably the Cowboys defense. Last week, they gave up 28 points and a loss. The week before, even though they beat the Bears by 3 scores, they gave up 29 points. The game before that, where they played the Lions, the most one-sided game of the last 4. And the week before that, they lost 26-17 to the Eagles, right? So it's like they're consistently giving up 25 points or more in these games, right? And as we saw on Sunday with the Vikings, now we know that this team, if it goes down in a game, they can come back and win. They have multiple ways to beat you. right? Dalvin Cook on the ground. Yes, Justin Jefferson, but there's some secondary players on the Vikings here who can make plays, right? So multiple ways to beat you. Cowboys defense is a lot more leaky than people think. Again, like it should have been 2.5 or 2 the other way, right? And then if it moves to 1.5, fine, right? People want the Cowboys, but again, so suspicious. And you're right. We're gonna look stupid after the Cowboys win by like a field goal on Sunday. This smells like trap. But you got to grab the points with the Vikings, right? Like, that's the smart thing to do.
I think so. I think you got to take the Vikings here. I think they are the better team, at least right now. The one area that I would probably worry about Tony Pollard just gashing them on the ground, or combination of Zeke and Pollard, because the both of them are just, I mean, well, mainly Pollard. He's looking unbelievable right now. He's taking this job away from Zeke if Jerry Jones ever would allow it. But I think that one big thing, if you're Minnesota, you got to keep Kirk Cousins clean, and that's identifying where Micah Parsons is, number 11, obviously. And they played him a lot at off-ball linebacker this past week, which doesn't make sense. I think about 75% of his snaps were from the linebacker position as opposed to a pass rusher. I'm not complaining because I need Nick Bosa to keep racking up the numbers to build that defensive player of the year case. So I hope that's the case. But it doesn't make sense to me why you would not have your best player, one of the best defensive players in the league, rushing the passer. Like, he wreaks havoc when he's rushing the passer. It doesn't make sense to me. I really don't get it. But if that's going to be the case, I think that's a huge problem for Dallas's defense. Like, sure, Micah Parsons can play linebacker. He's an unbelievable athlete. But I really think, if you're giving Kirk Cousins enough time, because DeMarcus Lawrence is ultimately made better when Parsons is doing his thing on the line, getting after Cousins, then you're going to give Minnesota a big advantage here with Jefferson, Cook out of the backfield, TJ Hawkinson now. There's multiple weapons that can beat you on this Minnesota offense.
Absolutely. Totally agree. We're going to get screwed in that game. I guarantee you. It's going to be like 24-21 Cowboys.
Don't say that. I hope not.
I hope not either.
But, Joe, so the SNF game, Sunday night, we have a great one in the rematch between the Chiefs and the Chargers. The Chargers should have won the first game in week 2. They got absolutely hosed. Justin Herbert made one of the dumbest decisions I think I've ever seen in my life. But LA's catching some points here. They were 7 points the other day. They've already come down to 5.5 at home, getting 5.5, I should say. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, they're kind of, on track to do some things in practice. Maybe at least one of them plays. Kansas City's rolling right now. Mahomes, overall, his numbers look good. I don't think he's playing as good as his stats suggest, but nonetheless, he is playing well. He did not play well in week 2, but you wouldn't know it by looking at the box where he should have had about 5 interceptions. Who do you think comes away with this one? Do you think the Chargers get their revenge and keep that playoff hope alive?
Yeah, well, the Chiefs are kind of dealing with something similar, right? We don't quite know what the status of Juju is going to be. And as we've seen the last couple of weeks, he's actually been very important to that offense, right? Seems like Juju and Tony kind of got going last week, which helps Mahomes. But yeah, I'm with you here. I think we're both going to agree on this as well. Second straight Sunday night game that we have the Chargers as part of. Last week, Taylor and we decided to take the 49ers -7. They only ended up winning that game by 6. So you were correct there by taking the points with the Chargers. So I'm not going to fade you 2 straight weeks. I think we're on the same page here. I would have liked, again, I do this stuff at the time that we're recording, right? So it's like if you got the 7, I think that's a huge steal. But I still think 5.5 is really good value. I think even if it comes down to 5 or 4.5, I would still grab the points with the Chargers. As we've seen the last couple of years with these teams, it seems like they play evenly matched games during the regular season, seem to always split. So I think in this spot, I think you're going to see the Chargers kind of rebound from that game earlier in the year. I also agree. I think the Chargers kind of coughed up that game. That was probably the only Thursday night game, right? It was week 2.
Yeah.
So it was like the only good Thursday night game we had all year. So again, these two teams are going to be prime time. I guess that game was on prime now, so it kind of counts. But not really. But yeah, I'm gonna grab the 5.5 for the Chargers with you, pal, because I think what the Chargers are dealing with, I think the Chiefs are dealing with similar issues. And I like the Chargers defense to at least be able to contain Mahomes. Contain. I think this game is going to be a game where I think it's going to be less scoring than the first one was. I think you're going to see the defenses come to play a little more in this game. The over-under is 50. I actually like the under this time around. So
I'm leaning the Chargers. I need to see a couple more things on the injury report. It is Wednesday after all. I would lean LA. I'm kind of hoping they win, so I'm conflicted here, right? So the Chargers are my Super Bowl team, and it's a very narrow path for them to win the division and be in contention for the 1 seed. Chargers were the team I thought would win the division this year, and maybe they would have. A couple things go against them in the Chiefs game, which was cheating pretty much. And then they lose their 2-star receivers. They lose Joey Bosa. They lose key guys on the offensive line. Just got rattled with the injury bug, aside from Justin Herbert dealing with the ribs. I still think LA can hang here. Preliminary, I'll say Chargers plus 5.5. Like I said, I want to see what's going on with the wide receivers. But ultimately, this is a spot where I think Austin Eckler is going to continue to do his thing in the receiving game that they don't really have an answer for. I'd probably look to him for a prop, maybe something along the lines of 6+ catches. I think he's probably I think he could probably get 8 catches in this one. He's a touchdown machine. I think we can see an additional tutty. So I'm going to lean with you on the Chargers. They usually split. And the one thing, like I said here, Kansas City is in line for the 1 seed. Now, I recently backed Patrick Mahomes to win the MVP. Not that I'm proud of it, but I got to take value where it's at, and Mahomes is a clear path right now. So I would really, really want Mahomes to win the MVP if that's the case. It'll wipe away a lot of mistakes I made with like taking a shot on Lamar Jackson, Herbert, my preseason pick, and a couple of those guys. So, it's a slippery slope. I'm definitely looking for Mahomes to have a good game, as he usually does. I think LA can hang here, though.
yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And like I said, I think with the question marks with both of these teams, I do like the under. I feel like this is going to be like a 24-17 type of game.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. So, one thing's been butter lately, Joe? My
Tell me.
teasers. My teasers have been so gas, so butter. And I was thinking, this week, what do I like? What do I like? There's a lot of good teaser legs on the board. I was trying to stay away from Minnesota because I'm not really sure what's going on there. I think, I want to stay a little bit away from the Chargers Chiefs. I came up with a couple of randos. I'm going with the New York Jets, getting 9.5 at the New England Patriots. It was a close one last time, or it should have been. The Jets should have won. And then I also like the Lions getting 9 at the Giants. I think, New York neither of these teams, or New York Giants, I should say, isn't that good of a team, in my opinion. They're 7-2, finding ways to cover, finding ways to win, sure, but they're playing a lot of close contests, a lot of them. And I think Detroit could stay inside of 9 points and ultimately come away with the teaser. There's a lot of options, so definitely be on the lookout for me with the rest of my picks for this week regarding the best teaser legs on the board. What say you?
As a Jets fan, I'm used to being optimistic and then getting kicked right in the nuts. And what game, one game a year always kicks you in the nuts? It's the game that they play in Foxborough. It's always the game, right? So
Yeah.
I like the Lions decision because the Giants, all they do is play 1-score games. I understand the logic there. But with the Jets, good luck. If I'm going to tease a team up, I would tease the Bears up. Why would I tease the Bears up? Because Justin Fields has proven now that he can run and be a threat to score on good defenses and bad defenses. The Falcons' rush defenses, we keep describing, they're not good, right? So I think there's a little value there, and I think if you want to tease any team up, you could tease the Bears because I feel like that's going to be a relatively back and forth, not super high scoring, but I think both teams are definitely going to score some points in that game. What say you about that?
I actually like the Bears. It's funny you say that because that was
There
one of
you
the
go.
teams. That was one of the teams I was looking at, and I have no problem with that. Absolutely not. I think the Bears probably get the outright win this week. Neither team is really impressive, but I'm going to go with the better quarterback. Right now, that's Justin Fields. They're passing a little bit better. He's getting Cole Kmet in the offense. David Montgomery's still solid. The defense isn't great, but neither is Atlanta. So I like the Bears to win outright this week. And I think getting 9 on a teaser spot, you really can't ask for much more. They're getting almost double digits. They're getting well outside of a one-score game. So do you have any other opinions on additional plays this week?
That's a good question. Well, I was going to say the Patriots laying only 3 in Foxborough. Again, I'm just expecting as a Jets fan that we're going to get kicked right into you-know-what. A lot of other games don't really spark enough interest. If you want to grab 13 with Carolina against Baltimore, do you feel like the Ravens are good enough to be laying 13 points, even though Carolina is not a good team? I don't think so. That screams like
I'm
the
off
Ravens,
that game, bro. I'm off that game.
That screams like you're going to get backdoored late, right? I'll tell you who I do like. If you're looking for an upset special, I like the Texans against the Commanders at home.
3.5, catching 3.5 at home. I like that.
I like the money line. After what I saw last week, I think that's a letdown spot for the Commanders. So I think if you want some value and you're looking to bet a straight underdog as the money line, I think you could do worse than the Texans this week.
Short week on the road in Houston. I think so. Some notable movement that I was interested in. I wouldn't play the game anyway, but it's worth note. The Rams were 4.5 about 10 minutes ago, and as soon as it was announced that Stafford had been practicing from his concussion, came down to 3.5. To me, there's not a big difference in that drop. But what that's telling you is people are betting it because Stafford, obviously, even without Cooper Kupp, and I would say Cooper Kupp's probably worth close to a point to the line, but I still think Stafford's good enough to get it done with other guys if they choose to get Allen Robinson involved. Ben Skoranek. The Saints are rolling out Andy Dalton. Very unimpressive to me. Spot where I think Olave has a good game if he's lining up in the slot. See if Ramsey matches up with them a little bit. But, Joe, we have to get to our emerging player of the night, brought to you by our Emerge Sports Group, our boy Jay Hen. I'm going to go with Justin Jefferson. Absolutely nuclear on Sunday. 10 catches, 193 yards, and a tutty. Arguably the best catch of all time. 4th and 18. Kept the game going. Kept his team alive. Ultimately ended up pulling it out. Jefferson is now plus 250 to an offensive player of the year. Before the game, he was plus 1,000. A lot of recency bias, big numbers. It's weird, though, because Tyreek Hill, even though we had a little bit more of a quiet game, still has better numbers to this point than Justin Jefferson does. And now, if you remember, Jefferson was my preseason pick for Offensive Player of the Year. Not that I'm upset about it, but the most equity that I get out of my tickets goes Henry, then Hill, then Jefferson. But it's great to see. And the market really flipped upside down, and I'm surprised it was this aggressive. This high of a drop I haven't seen in a long time. You would have thought Jefferson put up 400 yards on Sunday. I didn't even scratch 200. Still very interesting. But, Joe, give me your final thoughts heading into Week 11 here.
We didn't touch on it, but briefly, tomorrow night, the Titans play the Packers. I think the Packers save their season. If they want to continue to save it, they're going to have to beat a good team. And I think I like the Titans more as a futures play with Tannehill playing than not. Do I think he's great? No. But he gives that team enough of a threat when it comes to passing that can complement Derrick Henry and a defense that I think up to this point has played well. So I would be very curious to see what the Packers do. Can Aaron Rodgers continue saving their season? And I'm trying to look at the other game we didn't touch on. I guess the 49ers and the Cardinals on Monday night, right? Can't leave an episode without talking about the Cardinals briefly. We both like the 49ers, again, as a futures play. So very curious to see what they continue to do from here on out. And I think a road game against Arizona, I think if they win that game definitively, I think you're going to look at them as the NFC West winner. And from there, make some noise.
So quick note of that game. That game's actually in Mexico City, which, if you didn't know, is even higher altitude. I don't even know how that's possible. I'm being facetious, but I don't even know how that's possible that it's higher than Denver in the Mile High. So they're going to be playing at crazy, crazy altitude on Monday night. And it's weird because the Monday Nighters, like I said, a lot of underdogs have been winning, and they're catching 8 points in a home game. And it doesn't even look like Kyler Murray's going to play. I think it's probably going to be Colt McCoy again. I think Murray is, it's 8.5. Murray is a good week or two away. So it looks like it's going to be Colt McCoy. Do you still think the underdog is going to cover the spread at the bare minimum? Or you think the Niners are just going to run through them?
Yeah, I expect the Niners to run through them in a kind of game like this. Like, I think it's going to be like 2 scores, like 10 or 14. Like, I'm very curious because if the 49ers run through them, I think they're much better right now than we think they are, right? We're basing off like where they are right now, where they could be. To me, they're the sleeping giant in the NFC because I think if there's any takeaway from the first 10 weeks, I don't think there's a great team. There's not. There's not like definitively one team where you can point to and say that team's going to reach the Super Bowl. You know, the last 5-6 years or so, we've had mostly 1 seeds or top seeds that have been going to the Super Bowl. Last year was kind of the exception, but the Rams weren't totally a surprise. The Bengals were, right? The Rams, everybody's favorites. So I think this year, more so than last year, is a year where you could get 2 of those teams that kind of start from off the grid and like get hot and make the playoffs and go to the Super Bowl. So teams, like I said, I'm going to be watching. I'm going to be watching the Titans, what they do. Can they bury the Packers season and the 49ers?
That's a fair point. I'm not giving up on my Seattle Seahawks. I have a ticket on them to win the Super Bowl, believe it or not. I also have a ticket on the Niners to win the NFC. So I kind of did a little bit of hedge there. The best case scenario probably would be if the Niners played the Seahawks in the NFC Championship game. Absolutely. That way I would pretty much be getting equity one way or another because if Seattle made the Super Bowl by some miracle, and they're going to be underdogs, I'd probably look to see if I can do some sort of hedge, just kind of create some equity because let's say Seattle plays like Kansas City. I probably don't feel great about that, for instance. But Joe, it's been a pleasure. And listen, we're in the final stretch here. And I think this is very important because this is becoming the hardest time of the year where playoff pictures are starting to crystallize and, award markets are starting to firm a little bit. Just keep on, man. Keep battling, baby. We got some more money to win. But anyway, you could check us out on Twitter. I'm at _JohnnyVTV. He's at JCalabrese1. Truly appreciate you joining in. Everybody, hope your week is filled with winners. See you next week.